maybe the first 3 days
Good
I was
morning,
mad.
and welcome to the Friends Wheeling Tour of number
I stopped.
115 14th
And then
Street.
wrongfully, about
This we
2 and a half
call
weeks
the
ago, I
McLain
got into
House
it late with a lady
because it was
at
originally owned by
She was in the
Thomas
right.
McLain.
She was checking
It
out.
was
And,
built around
I had her a little shook up.
1892.
Because one time she said,
Thomas
"Oh,
McLain and his brother
and
were
I
druggists.
said, I think you mean a fathom, don't you? And I said,
Right down there.
yeah.
They owned drugstores in various places in town, one of which was located where Red Barn Chef is now. So Thomas McLain and his family lived in this property until it was sold around 1903-04. The next owner was Bernard Horkheimer and his wife Estella. They're listed in the 1903-04 Board of Directors. Horkheimer and his family were German immigrants. They had a grocery business. You don't know how. So their warehouse.
And I truly believe that Belmont to Ohio. I really.
When that warehouse was active, there was a rail siding that went into the building. And unfortunately, Bernard Horkheimer was pinned by one of the rail cars.
Oh, that, yeah.
Well,
Florida, California, and
Mrs. Horkheimer, his
yeah,
widow,
and
lived
other
in the
ones.
property
Oh,
until
they get that.
1910. It was sold to a Frank Swift, who was a broker and traveling salesman, and then to Reverend Pliny Ferris and his wife Alice. Ferris was the pastor of Second Presbyterian Church, and that has a nice link to the front property that's here. There were subsequent owners over the time period. The Antonucci family owned it for quite some time until the 1980s, and then from around 1990 or so it was empty. Former Councilman Brian Wilson purchased the property.
Texas, yes.
Did some structural repairs. And in May, the current owner
Yes, I knew it's bad.
purchased the property and is doing the rest of the work, and the rest of the tour will
But
be
they're not
led by
linking it to that party. See what happens.
Can you hear me if this is on or you want to Alright, welcome. Dean gave you a pretty good history, but a couple things I just want to point out. That if you look under the second story window, you can see there's a hole and a little bit of a ghost, and that is of the front porch. There are a couple generations of front porches on this building. The most recent one was non-historic and was associated with this whole configuration. So once we figure out what that should look like down the line, that'll go back up. There's really pretty brickwork around the cornice, the top of the roof line, as well as to the left of that window. That really pretty molded brick along with the design joinery with the bright white butter joints. It's really kind of typical on this street in this area where the most important part of the house was the front elevation, and that's where all the detail would be. And then the sides, you would just use common everyday brick. So the house is sort of an asymmetrical Queen Anne with aesthetic elements. So in the kind of aesthetic movement, you see a lot of geometric and natural motifs. The door is pretty indicative, especially with this diamond, and it's in pretty good shape. It'll be restored, and then you'll see that throughout. Entryway is why I decided to buy it. I love it so much. The stair is really beautiful with hand-carved and turned spindles, and then there's some decorative paint and decorative finish on the wood areas. So that wood was stained shellac and then faux painted to appear to be a higher quality of material than it actually is. Oh, the fireplace over here is one of my favorites. It's all of the fireplaces, as far as we know, are actually Cambridge tile, which is in Cambridge, Ohio. It was very popular, and they had a lot of decorative tile styles that you can still find in the historic catalogs, but it is kind of unique since we have Wheeling tile right here in Wheeling, but they went with Cambridge. All the mantles and chimney surrounds are stone, and they're very, very heavy. And as we wind through here, there would have been a separate servant stair that terminated right here. At some point that became a half bath. And then the dining room here is a modest size, but it's still quite nice. And one of the biggest eye-catching elements are these stained glass windows, which are not original to the house. They came out of the Second Presbyterian Church, which came down in the 20-teens. And the previous owners, Brian and Stephanie Wilson, knowing the history of the house and knowing that that congregation had owned this property, at one point decided that they would ask to have that salvaged from the tear down and repurposed into this house. It's a pretty unique little story. The other interesting thing here are these spring-loaded hinges on this door. The reason you do that is because you want a door that always closes on its own, and you see those on butlers' pantries usually because you wouldn't want it hanging open and see what's going on behind kind of closed doors. Another really pretty chimney piece, and then the pocket doors are all still functioning. They're still their original finish. They have their hardware, they have their keys. So that was a big asset to this house. And they're so tall. You can see one here. The ones from the hall to the living area are 3 panels wide and just enormous. Another pretty chimney piece. I'm gonna head upstairs. Some of this woodwork is just so impressive and really amazing that it's survived all these years through all the different ownerships. And again, you see those geometric and natural motifs. The dust corners are all still on the stair, which I think is really special. And the profile in the baseboards is another one of the things I really love. It's so intricate, these rounded corners. And the rosette motif here on the knoll posts matches that of the original first floor woodwork. So the previous owners lived on the first floor as they worked on the upper levels. So these upper levels require a little bit more attention. Once we get our gutter system in place, we'll be able to demo the interior walls and things that are past the point of no return, allow the house to breathe and kind of get back to the natural airflow that needs to happen to have a secure house, and then we'll redo the plaster and the walls. The other thing that's kind of interesting up here, these side lights, see the curved woodwork, they would have originally had curved glass. At some point down the line, mid 20th century, they came in with these just regular 1/1s. When the restorationists I'm working with rebuild this window system, I think we're going to do the curved glass once again. Oh, I forgot to point this out. The chimney piece for this room is in the kitchen right now, but it is lovely. And so this will be rebuilt. The tile for the hearth is right there, and then the chimney piece is in the kitchen. Another thing that's interesting is this is an original doorway, and you'll notice the woodwork's a little different than it was downstairs. That's really typical because there's a hierarchy of scale, so the most people would be seeing the first floor room, so you want as much kind of decoration and ornament as you can afford on that level, and then it slowly becomes less. So these are original, and this doorway suggests that this back room was actually probably the master bedroom, and this front room was more likely like a sitting room, and then this side piece over here is still a bit of a mystery, but very likely a nursery or sewing room, something like that.
And transoms?
Yes, all transoms throughout, and many of them work. I'll do the one in the laundry room because I know that one works. This hallway's not in too bad of shape. We'll just refinish the plaster. And then notice this is where the servant stair came down from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor, and it now comes right down onto the ceiling of that half bath. And it's still decorative, but it does change. So your spindles are no longer hand carved, and you don't have those rosette details or the decorative painting. This is the back bedroom, possibly the original master. It'll be a guest room for me. And here in this corner, we see there's a lot of repair that's needed. That'll go along with the gutter system that will go on first. And then, I hate to say this is my favorite because the dog mantle was really my favorite chimney piece, but I really like this one too. I don't know, I like it. This is the bath. It originally would have kind of ended right about here, and the previous owners took some of the back room to allow for a full-size like stand-up shower and toilet. And this wainscot is from Mount Deschanel. It was salvaged, and yeah, there's a little bit more of it, so we'll finish off around here and then tile the shower, and it'll pretty much be ready to go. Not a bad bathroom at all. And a pedestal tub rather than clawfoot, which is kind of, it's still very old, but just different. And then back here, this would have been the back bedroom, maybe for children, maybe for, I don't know, maybe likely for just the children in the home. But the previous owners plumbed in the electric and the plumbing for a washer dryer, which is what I will do as well. And this whole back room is going to be like the master closet. Because if you noticed, not very large closets in these homes, but I think it'll work just fine. And again, this is where I should have a downspout. So once gutter system, downspout, water away from the building, this will all get demoed and replastered.
Sure.
Okay, so the attic, if you just kind of, if you can make it around the bend, you'll get light from the upstairs window. It's all safe to walk on. So going up to the third floor, we've got a few different generations of partition walls that come up. So the one that we see at the top of the stair immediately to your right comes a little later. Originally, it probably would have all been open and likely would have been where the children slept. And then you'll see later there's a bathroom that would have been for the maid. This area, we've got some investigation panels cut to figure out how to hang the gutter system.
She bought the house.
So there's pockets in the masonry that allow for an outrigger to jut out, and then that becomes the nailer for the gutter system. So that'll all be rebuilt. As well, we'll cover up the holes, we'll clean it out, and then it'll be an attic for the foreseeable future for me. Certainly don't be understood. Same with this room, very similar. It's probably a child's bedroom at some point later down the line. That'll be another window that's rebuilt, clean it out, clean it up, and call it a day. And then this little back room is sweet and a little interesting. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in here, but it does have some really kind of vernacular trim work and a little transom, but not hardware. It might have been. And then in here we found a chimney for a little stove. So this probably would have been live-in help. But I think it's a sweet little room. This is my favorite in the attic.
Lovely wallpaper too.
There's wallpaper everywhere. I should have said in the front room, I think I counted back 7 or 8 layers of wallpaper.
Mm.
And then it's so tempting to like keep making a right and go down onto the bathroom ceiling, but just skip that stair and come back out the front.
What about the kitchen?
Oh, did you skip the kitchen? And again, most of these transoms on the first floor would have had stained glass in them. And this is the kitchen. Now, this back part of the house, particularly on the first floor, when the Wilsons owned the property, was in much worse shape. So they really lifted the floors, reinforced the structural system in the basement so that these rooms were able to be back into usable condition. They redid these, or they installed these floors, so they're not original, but they're very complementary to the period of the house. The cabinetry is salvaged from another property that was being torn down in Wheeling, and it's, again, completely appropriate to the vintage of this home. And again, we have a pretty rounded corner, tin ceilings, and if you look at one of the little windows that's open where the tin's been removed, you can see there was a fully plastered ceiling beneath it, so it appears that maybe not the first owner, probably not Mr. McLain, but maybe Horkheimer or someone after came in and put in this tin. This is kind of a fun addition.
Do you plan to keep the tin?
I do. So the tin, even though it looks rusty now, will come clean fairly easy in, relative terms. And I think I'll just, if I need to replace it, replace a few. You can actually cast, kind of like auto body work. You can mold and cast off of these tins and make a copy. So they actually started to do that here. So you take like a fiberglass compound and you press it into a tin, and then you make your negative and you press it into the mold, and you can make a new tile. So I'll do a few more of those and replace the damaged ones and keep that. I think once it's all painted, it'll be a really pretty feature. That's it.
So what's your time frame?
I'm hesitant to even say it out loud because these things always take longer than you think, but once we have the gutter system, roof, and masonry started, that'll be about 6 to 10 weeks, and then the house will need a period of time to breathe, so we'll be doing interior demolition during that period. So then once the house is effectively wicking water away from the building, it'll need a little bit of time to breathe. We'll get some dehumidifiers in here to accelerate that. And then once the house is dried out, which is really weather dependent, but it should be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, we can start to do interior work. So I would love to be at a point where it's not finished, but we're doing finishing work by the end of the year.
Oh, awesome.
And I'll have construction crews here working. It's not just me. So.
All right. I will say that Betsy has applied for one of the Friends of Wheeling Preservation Loan Guarantee loans through West Banco, and that's in the process. And so that loan will be used for the initial gutter and downspout work. So we're looking forward to seeing progress on this whole house. So well done, Betsy.
Thank you. And it also will be a tax credit project. So I'll be utilizing the West Virginia Residential Historic Tax Credit, which is for property owners working on their personal residence that are restoring it or rehabbing it in line with the Secretary of the Interior standards. If you do all that work and it is approved, you'll receive a % back in the form of a tax credit. So that's what we're doing in here. Do you want to see the little house or anything? Okay. Sure. So one of the other things I love about this property, also this door is just beautiful and it's in great shape. The hardware's there.
That little doorknob.
I love these panels. This is all going to get scraped, cleaned, restored. But another thing I really love about the property is the yard and the outdoor space. So historically, right where this retaining wall is, there would have been where the yard ended, and then there was a house immediately to my left. But at some point that house was torn down, and the previous owners went through the process of acquiring that lot. It's now part of this property, so once we're done with construction and we're done driving trucks into the yard and things like that, we'll be able to put up a fence and probably brick wall and retaining wall to keep it all in line with the visual character of the street. Right now it just has my garden beds. And then this is a little house, as we call it. From what I understand, the Wilsons moved this building from the backyard of a different house in Eastfield that was going to be demolished. And then they were very big preservationists and salvage people. And so they incorporated a lot of elements from other salvage historic properties that had been unfortunately demolished into this little building and made it their kind of studio. So it's got all sorts of fun things. It has stained glass, it has this beautiful historic door, more stained glass transom. And for me, it's going to be a workshop. It has electricity, so I can run tools in here. It'll help me keep the work site a little cleaner and do the work in here. And then once the house is eventually finished, my mother wants it plumbed and ready for. We'll have lumber storage up here, we'll have the workbench here, more architectural bits and pieces this way. So it's really functional, it's really useful. I think that's it.
Okay.
All right, thank you again, and thank you for all the Friends of Wheeling people who are watching today.
And they're asking for an after tour.
Absolutely, well, definitely. We may even do an in-progress tour.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
Bye,
All right,
everybody.
thanks.
Thank you.